Greetings, Rays community. Brent coming in live from Navarre Beach, Florida, where my family and I continue our remote school, remote work adventure. On the other end of that spectrum, I am thrilled to host Diane MacGillivray, who leads the advancement organization at Northeastern University. And Diane is coming in live from her office in Boston, where she has worked every single day since June 1st. Not too many people can say that. Diane, welcome to the Rays podcast.
Thank you, Brent. And while I'm super happy to be in my office on campus, I'm also a little envious as I look out at the snow covering the ground of your location in Florida. So I hope you're having a warm and sunny day.
Well, I just got a text message from my wife and our three boys before we went live. They are out at the Navarre Beach fishing pier, which is the largest fishing pier on the entire Gulf of Mexico. So they're doing that. I'm recording a podcast. We're all doing great. So we're really happy to be here. But tell me a little bit more in a time of remote work, remote everything, quarantine. You've been in Boston and you've been in the office and you despise working from home. So let's just go there. Tell me more about that.
So I am, like so many people in the advancement profession, a person who loves people. And I have always really enjoyed being part of an organization, part of a team, part of a group, and being able to have that energy and feed off of the ideas and the exchanges that we all have. Whenever I have the opportunity to work from home, like when there is a blizzard and we're stuck there or something like that, I have this idea that I'm going to be incredibly productive. I'm going to have, 30 phone calls and do a load of laundry while that's happening, and maybe, straighten my closet while no one can see what it is that I'm doing. And it ends up that I do absolutely nothing well in the day, with wet laundry still stuck in the washing machine, 2 of the 40 calls I intended to make completed, and a half done pile of whatever it is I thought I was going to do while no one could see me. Add to that I, like so many people, had, when my daughter graduated from high school and went to college, downsized into the city, live in a fairly small condo here in Boston, where my husband was also working from home. Our daughter came home for a period of time. And what I can tell you is 3 people on Zoom calls all at the same time is not a recipe for a happy family. I'm not unique in that. So the moment I had the opportunity to be back in the office, I grabbed it, and I've been happily here ever since.
Thanks for the background, and thanks for having the bravery to have a contrarian view about the future of remote everything. And, I definitely can empathize. And I think, there are certain moments, right? There are certain things, for me at least, where it's been more efficient, right? It's been great to be able to connect with people via Zoom who in the past might not have known what that was or been comfortable doing so. But there are definitely moments, especially with the team, where it's just not the same. And I think about, we used to have these all hands meetings periodically, right? Or it could be a new product demo that our team would be doing. And, the clapping, the cheering, the camaraderie, and now all of that is conducted in large group Zoom meetings, and it's silent, and you get the chat box or, the clapping hands on the window. But it certainly, is not the same energy, which, I think given the challenges of the year, it would be amazing to be able to experience, will be amazing to be able to experience soon.
I agree with you. And I should also say, because the reason I've been able to be here in my office is because Northeastern University is open for in-person instruction, for the residential experience, and more than even the team, which I love, and I'm able to see many of them, of course. We have lower density, and so not everyone is in the office all the time. But to be able to walk out on campus and just draw the excitement from our students who are, being so resilient and learning to deal with what it's like to be a college student during a pandemic has been an incredible and amazing experience for me. And I'm so grateful to them for taking this leap and this, you know, having the confidence in the institution. And so it really just kind of, it reinforces why it is great to be in academic fundraising as a profession. It's an amazing experience.
I definitely want to come back to that. But one of my favorite things to talk about with our guests is to understand your own education journey. And I had done some research in advance of the call. I know that you've got some family ties to New Orleans. We were just there earlier this week on our trip. And so they were all gearing up for Mardi Gras, or this year they're calling it Yardi Gras because of the restrictions on the parades and so forth. But I also read that you were a high school student who applied to one college, and that was Boston University. And not only that, you were a high school student in Anaheim, California. And I'm just going to go on the record and say, you're the only person from Anaheim, California ever to apply only to one college, with that college being Boston University. So with that setup, I cannot back that up with any data, but I stand by my position. Tell me a little bit more about your journey growing up and what led you to Boston University.
Well, it's a strange journey, but I suppose everyone has in their own ways a journey that is completely unlike anyone else's. My father is from Honolulu, Hawaii. My mother is from Bloomington, Illinois. They both were anxious to get out of what for both of them were, small towns. And so my father was at Tulane. My mother was at Sophie Newcomb, which was then a women's college, now part of Tulane. And neither one of them had ever really, they'd never been in Louisiana. They'd never been to New Orleans. They went to college sight unseen. And it was an interesting time, the mid 60s, to be in the South, but in a cosmopolitan city like New Orleans. And so I was born there and spent some early years there as my father completed medical school with the intention to go back to Hawaii, ultimately to practice medicine. He was by then married to my mother. They happened to stop in Southern California he was doing his internship and residency there, again, with the idea that he would then recross the Pacific Ocean to go back home. But he just sort of stuck there. And so I tell people sometimes I'm a Southerner by birth, a Californian by upbringing, and a New Englander, I guess, by choice. Although now in January, it's, one questions one's choice. But we did live in Orange County. I grew up in the shadow of the Matterhorn and Sleeping Beauty's castle. My early career aspiration was to be a Disney princess. I didn't realize, aside from, having that job as a character, as many of my high school friends did while they were in high school and college, that wasn't actually something that you could do as a career for your whole life. I was also a very serious classical ballet dancer through most of my adolescence, and had the idea that I might join a ballet company rather than go to college. That didn't work out for a variety of reasons. Probably ends up being for the best, but that is the reason I only applied to one college. It was a backup. I'd never been to Boston. I arrived at Boston University thinking that every building would be dripping with ivy, and it would just be this idyllic kind of along the Charles River, crew teams out every day. I'd never experienced winter before. I had never seen snow till my freshman year of college, but I guess my parents sort of instilled in me this idea that, just go for it, just jump in and do it. And, it'll either work out or not. But I agree with you. I think I probably am the only person who has gone to high school with the aspiration of being a Disney princess who only applied to one university, and that university is Boston University.
Well, I got to ask, I think, so I played football at Brown University. I grew up in Iowa, and so I was used to kind of really harsh winters and so forth. And But I had one teammate from Hawaii and then a bunch of teammates from Southern California. And I'll never forget some of our freshman and sophomore JV football experiences, just watching these guys so miserable. And that's not easy, especially, when it's not something you really had planned or that you were maybe mentally prepared for. So not just weather-wise, but culturally, New England's a different place as well. I mean, what was it like? Did you feel any kind of, I don't know, culture shock or beyond the weather, or did you feel great in the community?
Oh, it was a complete culture shock. Especially I'd gone to a very small all-girls high school, Catholic school, and so I knew everyone in the community. BU is a really big school, draws students from everywhere. And so in the beginning, I think the hardest thing was to try to find my own niche, my own place, a place that I could connect into and feel that I was part of something beyond just my own studies. And I think about that a lot now when, as I see new freshmen here coming from all over the world. But I quickly fell in with the group of students who were aspiring journalists and joined the student newspaper. And that was kind of my thing for the whole of my undergraduate years. And
what was the best story you covered? Any stories that really stand out from your time in the student newspaper?
It's not a story per se, but it was the reason that I knew that I probably was not going to make a great journalist. And I had the opportunity to interview the then president of BU, a notoriously prickly and brilliant man named John Silber, who was president at BU for, I think, more than 15 years. Super intimidating guy. And I went in as, an aspiring reporter and asked him a question. The question had to do with faculty unionization. I'll never forget it. And I said something to the effect of, President Silber, many of the faculty think, and he stopped me right there and he said, young lady, what does many of mean? You have no idea what you're talking about. You have not prepared adequately for this interview. I'm not going to answer this question. Well, a good journalist probably would have pursued the question, persisted. But he had me back on my heels, and I thought, I'm never going to make an investigative reporter if I can't stand up to this president. And so it actually really kind of changed my whole career trajectory. But clearly, the moment had an impact on me that I remember. It was also something that stayed with me over the course of my career about not letting that initial moment set you back in the same way that it had to me as a student. And so it's a lesson that beyond changing my career course, and maybe, who knows what would have happened if I internalized the lesson earlier. I don't regret not being a journalist, although I have the utmost respect for what they do, especially now. But it was a great lesson on being prepared, but also not getting knocked off your game.
And so you pivoted away from journalism, but not away from BU.
Mm-hmm.
And were able to find an entry-level role working in more of an admissions capacity. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Was that a hard decision? I mean, even just staying in Boston, I do feel like I think of my teammate from Hawaii and the other ones from Southern California, and guess what? They immediately went back to those places. Did you feel the draw back to Southern California, or was it more natural to stick around New England a little bit longer?
I did feel the draw to go back to California, but at the same time, I felt this draw to stay in higher education. And even, well, now looking back on it, I can explain it and feel comfortable with it in a way that I didn't for much of the early part of my career. But the truth is, I just loved being on a college campus. And so, and I love young people. And so to be in admissions was putting those two things together, again, in a way that I didn't fully accept in the beginning. I kept thinking, this is what I'm going to do for a while until I figure out what I want to do. And it was only really 5+, maybe 7 years into my career, I gave myself permission to understand, no, this is where you want to be and this is what you want to do. It's not the temporary thing until you have the guts to go out into the real world.
And having that clarity early in your career, that you love young people, that you love being on college campuses, I'm sure it allowed you to focus, and then it became more, what do you want to do, and how do you want the career to evolve? And you pivoted into advancement, and you also made your way back to Southern California. And I think one of the things that stands out for me about your background is that, this is a sector where oftentimes, tenure is not very long. There's a lot of turnover. It's rare that you're able to grow into leadership positions without bouncing from institution to institution. And you're somebody who has done that twice, two real significant, 13, 14-year stints at both USC, which we'll talk about, and Northeastern. And then when I think about Boston University, BU, Northeastern, and USC have all been real growth stories at a time of challenges for the higher education sector. And I wonder if that's coincidental, or if that's something that, certainly BU, it was probably a different time and context, and their growth has maybe been more in the 2000s. But looking at your time at USC, your time at Northeastern, really just remarkable growth stories against a backdrop of pressures for higher education. Tell me about that, along with your journey into advancement, the experience at USC during a time like that.
Well, you're absolutely right. They are incredible growth stories, and one of the reasons that I have, stayed as long as I have at Northeastern and stayed as long as I did at USC. When I went to USC, it was in the context of admissions, enrollment, and that was the job that I had. But it was a place at the time that was changing rapidly, and that had it had an openness to people taking on roles kind of outside of the, specific job title that they had. And so I did kind of a lot of things when I was there. I did admissions work. I, for a while, served as the ombudsperson, believe it or not, for the liberal arts college, which meant I did things like manage grade appeals, the grade appeal process, and things that I had no experience and probably no business doing, but I just did it, and nobody seemed to object to someone, raising their hand and saying, yes, I'll do it, and stepping in to do it. So I then, after working in undergraduate admissions, I started working in and ultimately ran the undergraduate advising center for the liberal arts college, now named the Dorrance College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences. And I loved it because there were so many aspects of it. I feel like at USC, I had three almost distinctly different careers, one in admissions, one in undergraduate advising, and then one in advancement. So even though I was at the same university, it was like having three different jobs and progressing in the career there.
Can I just ask you about that? Because I feel like, look, there are silos on college campuses and distinct pockets of leadership and distinct strategies. But when we look at enrollment, which we don't spend much time in at Evertrue, right? We're really focused on advancement. But, what is enrollment? It is about, identifying your target market, telling your story, standing out, attracting those applicants, converting them, and then bringing them on as students. And then I think about student success. What is it? It's about retention and growth during their time here, right? And helping them succeed. And then advancement, I feel like it's very similar. Right now, it's a different market and a different mission, a different maybe a way of approaching people. But ultimately, it's about acquisition, retention, and growth across the board. And I'm curious, when you look now, the difference being sometimes I think one of the challenges of the advancement sector is, one, our communities are massive and our teams are relatively small. And we have 50 years of a life cycle to engage people. Whereas enrollment, we've got about 9 months. And every year the clock starts at zero again. So I've always admired the enrollment world, especially because the pace is so much different than advancement. And you never have any question at the end of the year of how you really did, right? There was less kind of fuzzy, right. Well, we've got a huge commitment in the pipeline and it's going to close in 2 years and the cash will be recognized in 5 years and whatever it may be. It's just, did we win or not? And what was the score? And I think student success has obviously, and maybe it was called advising then. I think now it's become student success. That's evolved a lot. But do you take any lessons from either of those areas where most advancement leaders haven't probably worked?
Oh, you're absolutely right, and I do. I've always felt very fortunate that I had the opportunity to work with what I sort of think about as the full life cycle of the institution, from students, and I'd include parents here. Thinking about, do I see myself here? You can't divorce your undergraduate institution, right? Once you've graduated from there, that degree and that that affinity stays with you, for a lifetime. So it's a big decision and a big commitment. Now, obviously, people transfer, people leave for whatever reason, but being able to be a support and a catalyst, and having the privilege of being part of that student and family's journey, for me, is very much aligned with what it's like to be part of a prospective philanthropist or a donor's or an alumnus or alumna journey and connectivity back to the institution. So yes, I think that the preparation that gave me for being in advancement absolutely shaped and has kind of propelled the way that I look at the advancement work that we do. And it's probably the reason that I've stayed at two places as long as I have, because I kind of like to see it through. Sort of, you get the opportunity to be part of the individual stories, but you also get to be part of institutional stories.
Are there any students that you recall working with? And I'm sure it had to be fulfilling not only to see them succeed at school, but I'm sure in some circumstances, and now with Facebook and LinkedIn and different platforms, that you're probably able to stay in touch with people who in the past it would have been maybe harder, or you would have lost track of. But I've been fortunate to serve as a mentor for the Brown Football Association for over 15 years now, and to see what some of the people are doing who, I reviewed their resume in 2006, and to see kind of where they are now. I mean, it's one of those things where it feels good in the moment and it compounds over time. And I'm just curious if you have any specific individuals where you feel like, wow, I really made a big impact for them, whether it was by way of helping them get access to higher education in the first place, or, guidance and coaching you might have provided them.
It's hard to single out just one, and I'll step back a minute and say that when I was at Boston University, there were a number of administrators who weren't formal advisors. They were just people who took an interest in me and asked, how are you doing? What are you interested in? Do you have a job? Who took me and introduced me to people who might help me get that first job. And so I've always, I was a formal advisor at one point who knew the catalog backwards and forwards. But I've always loved that piece of it. And what I've always tried to remind myself is you can do this in a formal way. You can do it, with the title of mentor, but just caring about as many individual students as you can make a difference to their confidence and the way that they approach their studies and the way they approach their careers afterwards. So it is the most rewarding part, and the reason I love being on a college campus. But there are definitely, some students who have gone on to, we have a group of young global leaders. We started that group not that long ago, so they are genuinely young people, all 1 to 7 years out of Northeastern. And the stories that I think are really right now most fulfilling to me are not even the ones of individual success, but watching them create companies together and do things together and keep their network and affinity going. That's something that I'm almost as moved by and as proud of as any individual success story, because it means that what we're doing it's sustainable. It has lasting power to make a difference in how students are supported once they are no longer here.
And it sounds like your experience at BU, it was sort of that randomness and the wonderful nature of a college campus where those random interactions can happen, and then they can propel somebody to literally their entire career path, their entire life. I had those same, I'm thinking of the exact people, those exact random moments that really propelled me early in my career. But I feel like one of the things about Northeastern, and maybe one of the critiques of higher education where Northeastern's really excelled, is we can't let it be so random. We can't just hope that advisor, informal, formal mentor relationship happens to help Diane or Brent find their way and move forward. We've got to create systems. We've got to commit to it. We've got to really take it to the next level. And so I think so much of what you just described as being somewhat random in your journey, and certainly in mine, is a process, a playbook, and a system that has allowed Northeastern to really stand out among a very specific echelon of institutions.
Right. I think that experiential education, which is rooted in what we call co-op, and that connectivity that our students have with the world outside of that campus, walls, is part of what has really enshrined that here as a value. And so it becomes, if you have to always be blending that classroom experience with a work experience, with a real world experience, and then bringing that back to the classroom, the whole ethos of the place has to be very personalized, very customized, and very open to that back and forth influence. We can't ever sit in our ivory tower and think that we have all the solutions to the world's problems, because our students walk outside of the campus the campus boundaries, and they know more than we do a lot of times about where professions are going, where technology is going, where the world's going. And I can remember a student saying to me after coming back from his co-op job somewhere, Northeastern has one of the best computer science programs. It's just great. And yet you blast out the kinds of activities or, clubs or whatever to the whole world. Why can't you customize that? You know what we're studying, you know what kinds of things we like, why aren't you using AI and all of that to be more targeted? And I was like, wow.
Yep.
This kid's way ahead of me.
What is it like as an advancement leader? I know you're well networked in your peer group as well, but it's got to be pretty powerful when you have such a distinctive value proposition from a student experience perspective when you're making the case to donors. Because I think sometimes it can be an uphill battle if you don't have that differentiated of an offering, which is something that Northeastern's had for a long time. Does it make you feel more confident with donors? I mean, how does that support your team in being able to inspire people? Because it's not like Northeastern's had the highest alumni participation rate historically, or that it was always recognized in the way that it's been recognized now, nor was USC, frankly, during the growth period that you were there. So I guess my question is just how important is that distinct value proposition in today's landscape to really inspire philanthropists to support you all in your mission relative to other things in their communities?
Well, that's a great point. And I think it's absolutely critical. I think we are seeing, even at institutions with great traditions of alumni support, I think that increasingly donors, and certainly younger generations of donors, are looking to understand what kind of impact they're going to have. There are so many needs, of our institutions, but also of the nation, of the world. And I think people are very generous, and they have to make choices about where they're going to be directing their philanthropy, where they're going to be directing their energy and their time. So if you don't have a distinctive, value proposition, as you said, if you don't really understand the mission and why your university, this particular faculty member, that particular program are well positioned to advance that, I think it's very hard. I think the days of alumni giving just because they're grateful for the experience they had, I think that is diminishing. Not that that won't always be an important part of what we seek and what we do as academic institutional fundraisers, but we really, I think, are seeing a trend that we are going to need to go beyond that. And that means really understanding what our institutions uniquely do. And I think, yes, I mean, one of the reasons I'm at Northeastern is that I really believe in its unique and distinctive and differentiated place among colleges and universities in the country. But I think pretty much, every college and university has that, or they wouldn't attract students, they wouldn't attract faculty, they wouldn't continue to exist. So at least for our team, it's, constantly hammering on the three questions we always want to answer for ourselves. Why Northeastern? Why me? And why now?
One of the things that we're hearing a lot about that you were just hinting at is donors want to understand the direct impact of their work. And it doesn't mean just $1 million donor, right? $1,000 donor. I know that if I give $100 to that GoFundMe, exactly who it supports, why it supports, that they're going to get it. And we had a really interesting conversation on a podcast episode that we recently published called with Dr. Mark Barnes, who runs advancement at Dillard University in New Orleans. And Dr. Barnes was just telling us that they had such a poor alumni participation rate, 4% alumni participation, but they understood that there was this real challenge that was stopping students from graduating, which was there was a big group of students who literally were running out of money, who couldn't pay their outstanding balances, wouldn't get a degree, wouldn't walk. And that has all kinds of negative repercussions because then your retention rate and all of these other things, it creates this downward cycle. And so in his case, he said, we just went and ran after that problem, created a program, they called it SAFE, and they went out and sold that vision to alumni, which was, hey, Brent, this check will literally help that student graduate. But what was really neat is that's budget relieving. It's impact driven, but it's budget relieving. And I think that's where there's always been this struggle of, we'll give to the annual fund because it keeps the lights on, is not nearly as exciting as help these students literally walk the stage. And so how we walk that line around impact while recognizing that there are budget relieving objectives that you all need to achieve is, I think, just so critical. Do you have stories like that, or are there similar, ideas that you've considered or heard from your peers? Because I feel like this is such an area of growth for the sector.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, my CFO would love for every dollar to be completely unrestricted just go to that unrestricted annual fund. But as you said, increasingly donors at all levels, especially I'm finding, this younger generation of donors are wanting to understand that impact. And I think it is somewhat driven by things like, GoFundMe. We had a wonderful person who leads an organization called Donors Choose. You're familiar with it. Talk about how it is that they, appeal to people to support primarily teachers in the needs that they have, and the satisfaction that someone gets when they're able to either complete a project, by their gift, now this person has the X amount of dollars they need to do something really specific. Yeah. And we took that to heart. And even with our senior class, gift project, we allow students to direct their gifts, and they are not large dollars. And in some cases, the administrative cost of doing this probably is greater than the dollar amount of the gift that's given. But I believe, to your point, that the more that people understand how their giving, how their philanthropy makes an immediate or direct impact on something they care about, the better that we will be able to really continue to connect with these upcoming generations of donors.
Yeah, and look, I think the reason the sector generates 50 billion a year in philanthropy is largely because we connect donors with their specific interests and the impact they want to make in a highly restricted manner. Just because there are more zeros on the gift doesn't mean that emotionally it's not the same for everybody else. And I think that sort of tension with the CFOs of the world is something we're going to have to continue to navigate, because I believe, especially in the upper middle of the giving pyramid, the middle of the giving pyramid, there's so much more that we could unlock if we could make more of that direct impact and connection clear.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that we will see that more and more, as the profession goes forward and as our institutions move forward, and really have to demonstrate. I think a lot of the large gifts, we saw the very large gift that Mackenzie Scott did, no restrictions, but I think that we're also seeing a lot of these mega donors feel that they come out of places that are solution creating, and they want to make sure that their gifts, they're not giving necessarily to big endowments, and they want to make sure that their philanthropy is solution creating, and they'll be very sort of metrics driven and transparency demanding about how that works.
Show me the financial model, just like any other investment that I've evaluated throughout my career, right? Well, I want to start to wrap up here, but I know that you're really passionate about the Women Who Empower program. And I just want to talk a little bit about the genesis of that and what stands out, and maybe any lessons that you take from that our listeners might benefit from.
So the genesis of our Women Who Empower initiative, it really started with the support of some of our board members who wanted to help us create more specific and intentional, we talked about intentionality a few minutes ago, pipelines for women to be growing their leadership within the ranks of our, future board members, members of dean's councils, et cetera. We just, like most places, our numbers of women and people of color and our pipelines need to be way more robust. And so the question was, how can we be intentional about growing this? And it just sort of blossomed from there. And I was really inspired by some mothers, some women who were engaged in the Northeastern community and invited me to be part of some programs that were like that for the corporate world. And I came back to campus and I said to our president, this was really fantastic. I just went to this 2-day program where I heard from just this huge spectrum of really successful people. It happens to be they were all women. And what they did, though, was talk about their stories and their industries. And I want to create something like that on campus. And one of the things, again, that I like about being at this institution so much is it allowed me, the chief advancement officer, to go off and build this initiative that probably in most places would not come out of an advancement operation, but was supported and encouraged because I was passionate about doing it. And it's really grown then over the past 6 or 7 years from a series of events like that, although we still have those, even virtually, where we bring in some really just amazing leaders across a spectrum of disciplines and industries, to an actual mentoring network, a marketplace that supports our women entrepreneurs. And we've started a student organization out of it, the Women's Interdisciplinary Society of Entrepreneurship. So it continues to grow organically. And the thing that I think is most heartening for me is that I'm involved now in a fairly small part of it, spectrum of it, because there's just so much activity going on. So I think one of the lessons is if you're passionate about something, pursue it. I think in most, hopefully in most circumstances, because we work at the kinds of institutions that love innovation and are all about education and growth, take it on and see where it goes. And others will be excited to join and then lead themselves.
I love it. And it's so important and such a great example of Northeastern living its mission, not just in the context of student experience, but employee experience and in your own experience. I did want to just start to conclude with one curveball question, which is, what is one thing we should all know about 19th century British history that we don't probably appreciate? Because my understanding is that was your master's degree.
Yes.
Mid advancement career, which you don't always see those two things intersect. So what should we know?
I think you should know that our whole notion of time comes out of the Industrial Revolution, that it isn't a kind of a fixed thing that always and forever was viewed in the same way. So now when you look at your clock and you think about time, you will always know that it doesn't come out of the medieval period. It doesn't come from the 20th century, but in fact, it is. And why do I think that's important to know? Because I think as professionals, we always ought to be challenging our own assumptions about something that we believe to be fixed and just an immutable fact. And so for me, that always reminds me that, disrupt your own thinking. Sometimes it's hard, but it's good for you.
I love it. Well, as we cross from the Central Time Zone into the Eastern Time Zone later today, I will definitely keep that top of mind. One last question. I know you mentioned even some of our guests that we've hosted previously on the podcast are people you really respect in the sector. I mean, that is one of the really neat aspects of the advancement space, is just how connected, how much sharing happens. Where do you turn to for community in this space, and who are some of the leaders that maybe you feel like you've grown up with as a leader in this space?
Well, so many great people, as you said, in this profession, because I think it is a profession that attracts people who are really committed and who care about people, and they care about education and the kind of research that can make a difference in the world. I mentioned as we were preparing to come on, my friend Jim Hudson from Boston College, who I think is one of the great advancement leaders. And he's a person that I call, sometimes I'll say, don't tell anyone I'm calling you with this question.
Can I ask you why you feel that way? Because you do interface with a lot of people, and Jim does come up, but what is it specifically that you've really, admired about his friendship and collaboration?
Not only has Jim built just a tremendously great program at Boston College, he is open and generous with his time, with his wisdom, with his insights, and he's just someone that no matter how busy he is, when you have a thorny problem, he's happy to puzzle it out with you. And there are others as well, but Jim stands out to me in particular because when I first came to Northeastern as the chief advancement officer, not just one of the leaders, he was a person I was able to say, I'm not really sure I fully understand what I'm doing. And, that ability to be vulnerable and open, I think is something that I appreciated in my conversations with him. And I would say, if I was giving advice to others, to never be afraid to ask, because I do think the advancement leaders that I interact with are so open to sharing their successes, their insecurities, their uncertainties, as well as advice for what's worked in their own contexts and situations.
Really, really good concluding thoughts. If people who are listening do want to get in touch or want to reach out, Diane, I know you're on Twitter. I know you're on LinkedIn. Is there a preferred medium to stay in touch?
I like LinkedIn, but I like the just straight up good old fashioned email. It's the thing that I know is going to land in my inbox and I'm going to see it.
Well, you can all look Diane up and find her email address. Feel free to reach out. But thank you for sharing your journey and your optimism with all of us, and also a window into a good old fashioned office where you can send good old fashioned emails.
Absolutely. This has been so much fun, Brent. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that people will reach out because I'm really grateful for the community that you're creating here. I think it's a really important and sustaining one.
Thanks, Diane. Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.